Hello everybody and welcome to another Stellaris video. Today we're going to be talking about the tech tree, how to rush on the tech tree and find certain techs that you need as fast as possible, and I'm also going to go over what I consider to be the more important techs in the game that you should be rushing every single game that are helpful for your basic economy. Before I start, I would like to explain how techs work, which is that they are sorted by two categories, which are the category, such as particles or field manipulation, and the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, etc. The way the tiers work is you need to research 6 techs in one tier, or tier 1, before you can then research a tier 2. You need to research 6 techs in tier 2 before tier 3, and so on and so forth. The next thing is that these tiers are independent amongst each category, right? So I need to research 6 physics techs before I can research a tier 2 physics tech, and so on with society and engineering. With that being said, now let's start to go over on what I consider to be the important economic and research techs that you need. We're not going to be go over military ones because I believe that the ship rework is still in the pipeline and I want to wait for that before I cover ships. Anyhow, let's go ahead and get started. Field manipulation is an extremely important tech that increases energy output. The global energy management tech unlocks capacity subsidies, giving your technicians a plus 50% output, and then the planetary power grid gives a base output increase, while every single tier of the field modulation tree gives access to 20% extra energy credits from jobs and 10% from star bases. Incredibly useful in almost every build. The next thing I would like to go over are the technology-based buildings. There's going to be this for every single research category, where there's 3 buildings in the case of physics: the quantum computing, unified field theory, and quantum gravitational waves techs, which increase the base output by your physics by 1 per tier of building. And then the even more important building, in my opinion, is the Interplanetary Research Institute, which is a tier 3 tech locked behind exotic material labs that gives a plus 2 base output for every single researcher job on the planet. Also, administrative AI and then self-evolving logic for the plus 1. Technology selection options is a useful tech as well. And these are, in my opinion, the most important general physics techs that you're going to want every game. You'll also want one way to extract motes, and in some games you might want Zero or dark matter, but in general, those are more niche situations. Now let's go on to the society tree. The society tree has a significant amount more useful different techs depending on the build you're playing, but they might be more useless if you're not playing a certain build that relies on these techs. For example, the genetic healthcare and cyto revitalization are very useful for bio-ascension builds, as they increase your pop efficiency per tier, which is very nice. Food is, of course, only very useful if you're playing a bioship build or a catalytic-based build. Otherwise, these techs are fine, but you're generally going to be able to either buy as much food as you need or produce them through star bases, at least until the mid-game. So you won't need the craziest amount of food jobs, but the food chain is useful to go down, and these work very similar to the physics energy credit-based buildings, where food processing unlocks food subsidies, and then advanced food processing increases the base output. And then this other chain of techs that I'm hovering over now increases the output by 20% per tier. This will also be repeated with minerals. The next thing I want to go over is clone vats are very useful, locked behind just the genome mapping tech. And these are useful because if you're playing psionics, you don't have very many pops. If you're playing cybernetics, you don't have very many pops. If you're playing pre-ascended builds, you still don't have many pops. And even if you're playing bioascension, having that extra 1.5 base output can be extremely helpful, and I would recommend it. So yeah, look out for the cloning tech. And honestly, the most important tech chain in Stellaris is probably the following, which is once you take planetary unification, you can then find colonial centralization, which increases your capital building by 1 tier, which then unlocks a host of techs, the most important of which is galactic administration. This tech gives you a 3rd civic slot, which is absolutely crucial in many biological builds, and most builds in general. Global production strategy is a nice boost to your industrial resource output. Do keep in mind this requires certain techs in engineering to be unlocked, which I will hopefully remember to go over, but I'll just mention them now. They are the Tier 1 forge building and the Tier 1 civilian building or consumer goods building. So those are the techs you're going to need for global production strategy. And Galactic Markets is nice for trade-based builds. The two techs here, Ceramo Metal Infrastructure and Durasteel Infrastructure, are also nice for a +1 to your districts per planet, which can be quite useful as well. And there are other useful techs as well, like heritage sites, which can be found in the very early game and give yourself access to an early game monument, giving your civilians some base production and also increasing your unity production, which is quite useful. There are other niche techs around the society tree, but the most important of which that we haven't gone over yet is a standalone Tier 4 tech with no requirements other than being Tier 4, which is Ascension Theory, giving you access to up to Tier 10 planetary ascension instead of 5, which is absolutely enormous, and the Unity Ambitions, which are really, really game-changing as well once you have a spare Unity. Anyhow, with that being said, let's finally move on to engineering, also one of the most stacked tech trees in the game. If you're playing anything synthetic or robotics-based, the powered exoskeletons, artificial workforce, and then droids, and then artificial administration is an absolutely crucial tech tree, and machine template systems into robotic assembly plants is also extremely useful. And then the +1 to your, or +3 to your trait picks, super useful. +1 trait picks is again very useful here. And then binary motivators also, yeah, this entire tech tree is basically super important for synthetic based builds. If you're not synthetic, not so much. Once again, the mineral techs are very similar to energy and food, so we're not going to go in detail about the details of those. And then, of course, nano circuit assembly, replicator, kiosk, holographic casts, and nano separators increase the outputs of your alloys and consumer goods respectively, whilst also decreasing their costs. If you build the buildings you get from these techs, very, very useful. I would highly recommend them. The exotic gases and rare crystals are also super important for unlocking techs that require rare resources, and you should basically take them every game as soon as you see them. Very, very useful. And probably the most important techs that I haven't mentioned so far are weather control systems, a Tier 2 tech, anti-gravity engineering, a Tier 3 tech, which unlocks the arcology project. Techs I forgot to mention in society, and I'm just remembering now. I would highly recommend, if you're playing a Gestalt Hive or a Gestalt Machine, that you unlock the, where is it? It's Terraforming Tech, right? Terraforming Tech, right here, Terrestrial Sculpting, Ecological Adaptation, and then Climate Restoration. These two techs are required to unlock Machine and Hive worlds respectively, and they are super overpowered, and you're going to want to get those as soon as possible. Do keep in mind, Climate Restoration is a Tier 4 tech, so one of the ways you can actually beeline this quickly is by going with the adaptability tree and then using the agendas from that to unlock these techs guaranteed. Otherwise, they can be quite difficult to find, especially Climate Restoration. Definitely more difficult than finding anti-gravity engineering, which unlocks the arcology project, which is the end game world type for biological empires. Anyhow, with that in mind, there's other niche Fallen Empire techs and output techs that will help, random things out in overall. However, the other really important thing I would recommend you focus on is starholds into orbital rings and citadels and star fortresses, because this is the tree you need to go down to unlock mega engineering. I don't think it's shown here, but mega engineering also requires you to have the battleships tech. At least it used to. I'm not even sure if it still does, to be honest. But yeah, go ahead and take these techs. I would highly recommend it. I believe to unlock citadels, you also need the maxed out power reactor from physics. I wish there was a better way that it showed the requisites from other tech trees, but unfortunately, this is the best tech tree we have, so there's some things that just require the knowledge and that you'll accumulate by playing the game. And this is kind of when I wanted to mention this, but now that we've gone over all the techs that I think are super important, of course, you'll probably want to go on a destroyers, cruisers, and battleships chain at some point in most games as well, just for military power, although I said I wouldn't go into military stuff this episode. But I would really love if the tech tree was in part of the game, inside the game, kind of like in Civ. I don't play Civ, but I have friends who play Civ who find it really confusing now that they're coming to Stellaris, and they don't have a way to beeline a tech automatically. For example, I would love if I could click on, say, a tech I really want, like orbital rings, and then the game will automatically select the techs that lead to orbital rings whenever they appear randomly in my regular progression throughout the game. Same thing goes for, say, anti-gravity engineering or other important techs like the +1 civic slot I've shown throughout the game, as it is really hard for newer players and even experienced players to know which techs need the requisites from other techs and to remember all of them and take them when you see them, as there's so many other pop-ups and things going on in the game. So that's just a change I would love to see. Anyhow, I'm sure there's tons of useful techs that you might have wanted for a specific playthrough of yours. Go ahead and check out the tech tree here. It should help you find them a lot. Also, do keep in mind, take a look at the categories that each of the techs you're looking for are in, and you can use tech ascendancy and or your leaders to prioritize those types of techs more. For example, you could use New Worlds as a tech focus if you're looking for climate restoration, and it would increase the chance you find it early on by a considerable amount. Anyways, hopefully you enjoyed this video. It was pretty fun making. Please let me know if I missed anything, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.